I'm Garry Thornton. I'm one of the assistant principals here at Torrey Plains High School. And I had the privilege of working with Scott because I was assigned to oversee both the cheer program and ASB with him. In my first year at Torrey Plains High School, home of the Falcons, Scott and ASB coordinated this Halloween costume party and parade that would take place at lunchtime. And on Halloween morning, I arrived on campus and walked into the B building, and I saw this person standing on these stilts, of which I was looking for this week, and in one of Scott's closets they must be located, but I'm not sure which one, so I don't have them, which is a good thing, because if I tried to walk on those, I'd fall off and break my neck. But anyway, I see this person walking on these stilts and in this black cloak, hood over his head, and he's doing it gracefully through the building, and I'm thinking to myself, who the heck is that? And then I realized it was Halloween, and it was Scott. And as I was reflecting this past few weeks about Scott, and then actually thinking about what I was going to say the last few days, I thought, what a great metaphor. Scott is a man who walked on stilts. He didn't walk on stilts for everyone, but for the people that mattered most, he really did. Scott walked on stilts for Susie, for Jordan, for Cole. I know he did for his parents, step-parents. I know that because, and Scott, this was a gift of Scott's. He would tell you to come to something, and then you would be busy working at the thing that he invited you to come to. And I witnessed him convince his parents to come to our homecoming dance, and then they were working the homecoming dance. But that's Scott. There were very few winter formals or proms or football or basketball games when I didn't look up and see Cole and Jordan. And if you paid close attention to their faces, you could tell that their daddy walked on stilts. If you looked over and saw Scott sitting on his Cadillac golf cart, which he probably convinced Mike Powell to buy for him, and you saw Susie sitting beside Scott, then you could tell from the look in her eyes and the way that she listened that Scott was a man that walked on stilts. And we were fortunate to share that man at this school. The second thing that I thought about while thinking about Scott was that he is a man, and was a man who he had many keys. In fact, he had more keys than most custodians in this district have. And I confess that there are times when I look at him and I would say to myself, what the heck are all those keys for? I can't imagine that he knows. And one day I foolishly made a mistake. I decided I was going to ask him if he knew what all these went to. My eyes glossed over as he proceeded to tell me, this one opens this, and this one opens this, and this one is for that lock, and if you would give me a master key, then I wouldn't need this one, and on and on and on and on he would go. But then I thought, the key's not what's significant. It's the door that it opens. And Scott was the man who opened doors. There was a cheerleader a few years ago that one afternoon Scott came into my office, and he He actually was having a conversation with me, but it really seemed like he was talking to himself. because he said to me, you know, I should cut her. She's always struggling with her grades. I should cut her. She's late sometimes. I should cut her. She doesn't always follow the rules. I should cut her. And then the next thing I knew, he said, I think I should meet with her mom. And then he said, Garry, I think we should give her another chance. But because he gave her another chance, a young lady graduated from high school. This great high school she was able to graduate from because Scott saw in her a need to open a door, and he opened the door for her. Those of you who were at the vigil the other night, you heard this student and this parent and that parent speak of Scott and the doors that he opened in this life and that life. So it wasn't so much that he was a man with a lot of keys as much as it was that he was a man who just opened doors. And then Scott, Coach C, one that Rick didn't mention, Mr. Chodorow, was a man with many friends. I was trying to think of a prop to use for that, and then I realized what a slow learner I was. Just look around you. Scott is a man with many friends. And I'm going to take a moment, if you will, allow me just to talk about a few of those specific friends. One of them is Jackie Nitry. Her classroom was right behind or right in front of Scott's, depending on how you want to look at it. They talked. They supported one another. She was his friend as much as she was his colleague. She knew when he was hurting. She knew when he was really, really doing well. She was a good friend. Jim Anthony. Well, actually, I should say Scott, Jim, and Jackie were the business department here at Torrey Pines High School, home of the Falcons. Not very many people in that department. So they were colleagues, but they were friends. Jim was there for Scott if he needed him to cover his class, if he needed him to listen, if he needed him just to cover a meeting for him. Then Scott knew he could count on Jim. The woman behind the glass, who's probably groaning because she knows that I'm going to mention her, and that's Patricia. Yes, she was the ASB secretary. Yes, Scott's right and left hand. But she was more than that. She was his friend. I think she may have even baked cookies or cake for Scott once, and I don't think she's ever done that for me. But she was indeed Scott's friend. She was the one who said, Scott, that's too expensive. We don't have the money for that. Scott, you ought to try this. She and Tamara and Catherine were the ones that would gather in his room or gather in the media center, library office, and they'd eat lunch together and they'd talk. And if you walked in, you knew that it wasn't just colleagues. You knew that it was friends. And Scott had a lot of friends. And I know if he were here, he would say, all of you are either his family or his friends. Scott was a clever man. When there was a difficult decision, he knew how to craft the question so that he didn't have to answer it. He would leave that for me. So last year, Scott came to me. He had this brilliant idea, and I, knowing that there's a board member here, I want to give Scott the credit for this. It was a brilliant idea. It was Scott's idea, Joyce, in case you're wondering. there was this T-shirt that ASB, concept that ASB had come up with, and on first glance, you wouldn't get the gist of where this could go. The kids in Scott thought it would be great if they had a T-shirt that said, "We are Falcon Awesome." His presentation was great. I ended up saying, "God, it's a great idea." He left my office, and I thought about it again, and I thought, no, that's not a good idea. So many ramifications. Joyce, that was Scott's idea. There was an acceptable T-shirt, and I would like for us to try to do what Scott really wanted to do with this other T-shirt that actually came right before his brilliant idea about Falcon Awesome. That T-shirt some of you are wearing, it says, "We are TP." And I remember Scott saying, wouldn't it be great if we filled this gym and on the visitor side we had people scream out, "We are," and on the home side respond back by saying, "TP." And so, you're not going to be a passive audience. Get on your feet. Because I think we can make this happen, right? Okay? So, I'm going to just point to this side, and your role is just to scream as loudly as you can. Deafening, "We are." And then I'll point to this side. And one last time for Scott, we'll say TP. Okay? Ready? We are?
We are TP! We are TP! We are TP!
Thank you very much.